As we take a look at the rise in terrorism from Africa throughout the Middle East, we're now going to talk a little bit about one of the side effects of the move by ISIS into Iraq, that terrorists are now able to wander freely between countries and what's really becoming a borderless conflict for us. And that's compounded by fears that Americans and other Westerners are joining these terror groups. They're also moving freely with the intention of bringing their skills and ideology back home. Our FBI director says this problem is definitely a priority.
I'm still very concerned, as we've talked about before, about Syria as a breeding ground and a staging ground for terrorist groups. To the extent that the activities of this ISIL group expand that safe haven, that launching ground, it's obviously makes the concern bigger.
Joining us now, Waleed Phares, Fox News Middle East and terrorism analyst. He's also the author of the new book, The Lost Spring, U.S. Policy in the Middle East and the Catastrophes to Avoid. Aptly titled, Waleed, as we take a look at this big part of the story that hasn't gotten the attention that we think perhaps it deserves. How big is the recruitment now when you look at the recruitment of terrorists, of Westerners, compared to other times during the war on terror?
Jenna, it is a massive recruitment. I just came back from a policy conference of the European Parliament in Europe, and they are very concerned. Numbers are somewhere close to 1,000 Westerners, transatlantic, that would be French, British, other, and also Canadian and American jihadists who have been recruited to go fight, and that's only in Syria. We don't even have the numbers of what could be a jihadi group operating between Syria and Iraq, as now ISIS or the Islamic State of Iraq is taking the control of most of the Sunni triangle. It's a big, big problem.
Well, in order to stop that, we have to understand the motivation. What is it about these groups that their recruitment is so strong that it motivates a young man, and it could be a young woman as well, we've seen that in Syria, get off their couch in England or France or in the United States and say, I'm actually going to head to Syria and I'm going to take up arms? What is it?
Look, many academics, many researchers have been struggling to find the one answer, and many have been talking about, oh, it's socioeconomic, disenfranchisement, people who want a new life, the psychology, Hollywood, what have you. Reality is there's one common denominator across the board, both sides of the Atlantic, into the Mediterranean and into Africa. It's the ideology. And it's not just the ideology. Ideology doesn't come to you. You go to her, to the ideology, and there is an indoctrination process. The networks that are creating that indoctrination, even before these guys, boys and girls, goes to Syria or Iraq or Somalia, someone, some force online or offline in the West is indoctrinating them. That's the root cause.
Putting it simply, if the bad guys are so strong at this indoctrination, can we use some of what they do and create our own indoctrination so that these guys don't go to the bad guys, they come to the good guys?
That was supposed to be, Jenna, the war of ideas. We have been pushing this through Congress, through the European Parliament. Unfortunately, since 2009, there's a different policy under this administration. They don't want to talk about anything has to do with ideology. If you ignore the ideology, you are ignoring the indoctrination process. Yes, we have methods and strategies for de-indoctrination and de-radicalization. Unfortunately, the administration chose to fight them after they become jihadists, not before.
Is there anything we can do to change that? Are we completely reliant on government, Waleed, in this case, to promote that change?
We were supposed to, because they have the money. I mean, if you calculate how much money, millions and hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent throughout our military, our homeland security, to push back against the extremists, and then see the results, more hundreds and thousands of jihadists. Yes, the government is not performing because, as I said earlier, they are ignoring the center of this, the ideology. Now the private sector, NGOs, foundations are the ones pushing against this.
And when you mention the money, I think about the TSA, because that's one of the most obvious signs of how we're going to combat this ideology on the ground and confront it face to face if we are coming into contact with it. And that sort of comes up with this ABC News report, Waleed, that I'm seeing. An ABC News report is suggesting that terrorists inside Syria are combining forces with terrorists inside Yemen who are expert bomb makers. And they're teaching each other, they're exchanging skills, and the fear is that one of those bombs makes it into the hands of a Westerner who has a passport, who can easily get on an American-bound flight, and has that bomb with him or her. That's a really scary scenario. If we are playing defense rather than offense, what's the key to making sure that doesn't happen?
We are playing defense at the end of a game, not even in the middle of that game. And what you have just mentioned now is an indicator of what is yet to come.